Welcome to the early Jōmon period of Japan, a time over 10,000 years ago when humans lived as hunter-gatherers and left behind fascinating mysteries. 14,000 years ago, as the great ice sheets retreated and the world began to warm, a remarkable culture emerged on the islands of Japan. This was the dawn of the early Jōmon, a time when humanity took its first permanent steps into the lush, temperate forests of a new era. Imagine a landscape shifting from frozen tundra to a paradise of broadleaf trees filled with acorns, walnuts, and teeming wildlife. The people of this age were not mere wanderers, they were the world's first masters of clay and fire. The very word jomon means cord-marked, and it defines an entire civilization that learned to decorate their world with twisted fibers. Pressed into wet earth, these pioneers invented the bullet-shaped vessel, designed with a pointed base to be wedged into the soft sand of a hearth, allowing them to boil plants and shellfish for the first time in human history. This technological leap transformed their diet and their destiny. As you look at their villages, you see the birth of the pit dwelling, a clever architectural feat where the earth itself provided insulation against the seasons. These circular homes clustered together in sunlit clearings suggest a society built on cooperation and communal strength. They were also master navigators, carving massive dugout canoes from single logs to brave the currents of the Pacific Ocean in search of fish and trade through the massive shell mounds they left behind. We catch a glimpse of their spiritual world, where even the remains of a meal were treated with ritual respect. As we journey through the early Jōmon, we witness the incredible moment when survival turned into art and nomadic bands became a settled people who would thrive for thousands of years to come. The great ice sheets began to retreat, and the land of Japan slowly transformed into a world of forests, rivers, and abundant life. As the climate warmed, people no longer needed to wander endlessly in search of food. This moment marked the beginning of the early Jōmon, when humanity first chose to stay. The Jōmon people built their homes by digging into the earth. These pit dwellings used the soil itself as protection from heat, cold, and wind. Wooden pillars supported roofs made of grass and branches, while a fire burned at the center. These homes were not temporary shelters, but places meant for long living. Villages were carefully arranged in circular patterns around an open central space. This shared area was used for work, gathering, and ceremony. The layout suggests a community based on cooperation rather than power. Life revolved around the group, and survival depended on shared effort. Inside every home, the hearth burned day and night. It provided warmth, light, and cooked food, but it also brought people together. Around the fire, stories were told, knowledge was passed down, and bonds were strengthened. The hearth became the emotional and spiritual center of Jōmon life. To live in one place, the Jōmon learned how to store the forest's gifts. They dug deep pits to preserve acorns, chestnuts, and nuts. Stone tools were used to grind and prepare food for long periods. This allowed families to survive through harsh seasons without moving. Living permanently changed how people related to objects. Heavy pottery, large tools, and personal belongings became part of daily life. Pottery grew more detailed and symbolic, showing pride and identity. Staying in one place allowed culture, art, and tradition to grow. The early Jōmon were not simply surviving. They were building a way of life. A life rooted in the land, shaped by community, and carried forward for thousands of years. The word Jōmon literally means cord pattern. This name comes from the distinctive marks pressed into the surface of their pottery. It is one of the earliest known examples of humans decorating everyday objects with intention. The process began with clay gathered from riverbanks and forest soil. The clay was kneaded by hand to remove air and stones. To create decoration, the Jōmon wrapped plant fibers or twisted cords around wooden sticks. These cords were pressed repeatedly into the wet clay, leaving deep textured impressions. Each vessel carried the movement of the maker's hands, making every pot unique. Early Jōmon pottery was shaped with a pointed or bullet-like base. This form was not accidental or symbolic. It was a practical solution designed for cooking. The pointed bottom allowed the pot to be set firmly into soft earth or sand within a hearth. Surrounded by fire, the vessel remained stable while its contents boiled. Before pottery, most food was roasted directly over flames. This limited what could be safely eaten. With clay vessels, the jōmon could boil water and food for long periods. Bitter acorns were soaked and boiled to remove toxins. Hard shellfish and roots became soft, digestible, and more nutritious. This new cooking method expanded the available food supply. It reduced the risk of hunger and allowed people to rely more heavily on forest resources. Pottery made year-round settlement possible by supporting a stable and varied diet. Over time, the vessels became larger, thicker, and more elaborate. Decoration grew bolder and more expressive. Function and art became inseparable. Through cord-marked pottery, the jōmon transformed clay, fire, and fiber into one of humanity's first artistic technologies. Now we explore one of their most fascinating mysteries, the shell mounds, or kaisuka. These mounds are massive piles of discarded shells, animal bones, and broken pottery. At first glance, they might look like simple waste, but every layer tells a story of daily life, survival, and ritual. When early archaeologists first studied these mounds, they thought they were just garbage. This became known as the trash can theory. They saw shells, bones, and pottery fragments, and assumed they were left behind with no meaning. But modern research has completely changed this view. Scholars now believe these mounds were liminal spaces, or sacred sites, that connected the living world with the spiritual realm. The Jōmon people did not just discard food, they returned the remains of deer, boar, and clams to these mounds. As offerings, this ritual was likely done to honor the spirits of the animals and to ask the gods for future abundance and food security. By placing these remains carefully into the mound, they honored nature and maintained a spiritual balance. The shell mounds were more than trash, they were living, sacred spaces of respect, gratitude, and ritual. This is only the beginning, and the early Jōmon period has many more secrets to reveal. Make sure to press the bell icon so you do not miss the next part, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe.